terms that intrigue me. One, someone asked me about recently, relational equity.
Okay.
Relational equity. I remember the first time I heard that term, I was like, huh, that's really a good way to term that.
So how do you define relational equity?
When you are in relationship with someone and there's skin in the game, like you care about that person, and it could be a colleague and you care about them in a collegial way, or it could be a friend or a spouse, could be another family member. To me, to you, it's coffee. You have relational equity with coffee.
Relationship with coffee.
It's really not a two-way street, but that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, no, that's all right.
But it is with Raphael's Roastery.
Oh, love Raphael's Roastery. And you can check them out in the show notes. It's raphaelscoffee.com, or you'll find the link in the show notes. Encourage you to do that. And yeah, good stuff.
So good. And the friend that owns Raphael's is such a great friend. Now, there's relational equity there.
Right.
There's trust.
Yep.
There is camaraderie, and there's ministry opportunities.
I think we've built relational equity because of long-term relationship, trust, and doing ministry together, both in terms of broadcasting and podcasting, and then also he's involved in a homeless ministry that I know your family has been involved with on some level. Our family's been involved with, and so, yeah, there's a lot of relational equity there.
We need to have him on the show.
We should.
It just occurred to me. We need to have Mike on the show. So we'll work on that. But when someone asked me recently about relational equity, the question was followed with, like, one, how do you define it? But two, how do you develop relational equity? And it started making me think over the last several years, specifically the last several years. And that made me wonder about you all, because you made a big change about 5 years ago.
We did. Well, at the 5 years ago at about this time, we knew that we were going to be moving to Tennessee. I was starting a new radio job the very next day. Yes. Officially on the books with that organization. And my wife had, I don't know if she'd put in her notice yet or not. I don't remember. But we had known that, she was going to be coming home.
Yeah. I feel like by now she had.
I don't recall if she had or not.
Sure.
But she was going to come home, quit her job, and be mom full time. And so there was going to be a lot of change that was going to be happening there.
Lots of change. So with those changes, when you came to Tennessee as opposed to when you lived in Illinois, has there been any relational equity changes that have happened since moving to Tennessee?
Oh, sure.
In what way?
Yeah. It's interesting to see how, because of what our life looked like in Illinois, other than family, there were not a lot of relationships that, I would say we still keep in contact with people. For me, there's one or two, and that's about it. There was a relational equity with those people. Sure. That now 5 years later, and I don't know, 3 or 4 states between us, there's still relational equity there.
There is. Okay, still connection.
Yeah, and in fact, just got an email this morning from one of those friends asking for some advice on something. Right, so that's still there. Yeah, but it's not with very many people. Sure. From Illinois. I think that if we were to move on from Middle Tennessee and go somewhere else, there are a handful of relationships here, a greater number of relationships here that would continue because of the relational equity that we have decided to put into friendships and relationships here in this state.
Now, was there anything different from what you experienced living in Illinois and the busyness of life and the full-time working, everybody's doing their thing? Was there anything that you learned about relational equity that you consider a change? Like if you had those people there and you have people here, was there anything that you have experienced that you're like, wow, that it's different? Like it, don't like it? Like when change happens, we have a reaction to it. Yeah. So is there a difference in that way?
Like in terms of what we're doing differently
No,
now
I
to
mean,
build that,
like,
or
what have you learned about the importance of, like, you have great relationships with family. You have great relationships with a couple of people in Illinois.
yeah.
You now have a lot more relationships down here in Tennessee. Is there something different that you've learned about relationships that have either blessed your life or challenged your life in a way that maybe you didn't experience before moving here?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has struck me the most about that is the fact that those relationships where there was relational equity
Mhm.
that, from Illinois that lasted. And the reason that I think that relationships here in Middle Tennessee would last and the equity would be there is because we really, with intentionality,
Mhm.
made a point to get into each other's lives.
Mhm.
We showed up at different events.
Yep.
We prayed for each other. We prayed with each other. We talked about, struggles and victories and
Yep.
things like that. Just a lot more authenticity in
Okay.
relationship.
Is that then or now or both?
Uh, the relationships that lasted from
Yes.
Illinois,
Sure.
that existed.
Okay.
If that was not a part of those relationships in
Yep.
Illinois, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we are both, Susie and I think, are much more intentional
Mhm.
about trying to make sure that the people that we want to be in relationship with,
Mm-hmm.
we, as much as we're able,
Yeah. Oh,
try
sure.
to,
Sure.
show up, pray for,
Yep.
be more vulnerable and transparent with than we used to be.
Mm-hmm. And has that been the same for people coming alongside y'all since you've moved here?
Yes,
Okay.
it's taken a while.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, just not that long ago, there's a group of guys that I regularly meet with, and we'd been meeting together as couples for quite a while
Mm-hmm.
and have become, good friends. But then several of the wives looked at what was going on with the guys in the group and just the way that those relationships were being strengthened
Mm-hmm.
and deepened and whatever. And the wives came to the decision that we need to step out
Yeah.
and get out of the way.
Sure.
Because they're like, we think that we're actually putting the brakes
Yeah.
on what this group of guys could become
Mm-hmm.
by us continuing to be a part of that. And so that has happened fairly recently where the wives have said, we're out.
Yep.
We'll continue to do our thing.
That's great.
But you guys, with intentionality, go deeper.
Mhm.
And we've begun to do that
That's great.
and have talked about our desire to do that, have restructured our time together, started praying
Nice.
for each other
Yep.
out loud together,
Mm-hmm.
doing those types of things. And I think that is built a lot more relational equity
Mm-hmm.
and depth of friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the trust that comes
Absolutely.
in a situation like that, because you've got to have each other's backs. You can't go out and be gossiping about one another, and that's truly cool. And to you as a person, I didn't mean for this to be an interview, but I just know, like with the question that came to me about relational equity and what does that mean and how do you build it. It made me think of you guys because of the move that you made about 5 years ago, and it had me wondering, like, how has that impacted your life? You personally,
Yeah.
not just the family, but you as a guy having these different relationships the Lord has brought together. How has that impacted Steve Hiller?
It's been kind of a messy up and down journey
Sure.
through some of that. I think the very first relationships that God gave us was actually you guys, the May family,
Mm-hmm.
because you were intentional about reaching out to us
Mm-hmm.
and connecting with us and trying to introduce us to people and smooth our landing.
I have
And
a question before you go any further than that.
Okay.
Because if you went from what you had in Chicago, you already had this massive change coming. Then you come to the South,
Yeah.
which is different.
It is different.
And you've
Yep.
lived in Iowa and Illinois, and Susie's lived in Illinois. And then you come here and y'all meet us, and we are like, hey, you're living in an apartment, your kids need to get out, you need to come and run. And how did that, like in hindsight,
Uh-huh.
how did you go, what in the world? Who are these people? They're weird.
Um,
Did you ever think that?
Weird? No. Um, a little bit different than maybe what we've experienced before.
Yeah.
A little bit, but I gotta tell you, we were so grateful.
Sure.
Like we knew no one.
Yeah.
Like you guys were it. So, and I think we were like,
good thing we're nice.
Somebody's willing to be our friends. Yes, absolutely. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you do need a warm contact of some sort. Like we had that. The Lord gave us that when we moved to Michigan. Like we met this couple that, bless them, she was from Kentucky. And they were just so kind to us and kind of, let us come alongside. And then they would move to Tennessee.
Okay.
And so when we were coming down here to look for houses and things like that, they were like, hey, come on over. And our they have 2 boys and we have 1, but their second son and our son were the same age. And they were in nursery together in Michigan at the church.
Yeah.
And then would be at church together here for a little while. But you just are so grateful for the people who say, hey, we see you. We see your need. And it may not be forever. It may just be a season. But that ability to have a friendly face, you need a dentist, you need to know how to get somewhere.
Right.
Like,
I don't know how many different doctors, dentists, car mechanics, things like that I asked you our first year here. I'm like, hey, who do you take your cars to? Who can we trust? What do you? Yeah, all those questions.
So helpful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad it didn't come off as weird because I think, especially with a cultural difference like Midwest to South, and then, we worked together. So we had that friendship, collegial thing built in, but then the families to come alongside.
Right.
But I think just letting the kids run and play and not have to be cooped up, because apartment living is tough. And I know that's reality for a lot of people, but you guys had come from a house with a yard. So and they were young. And I'm like,
oh yeah,
Ben,
we're
having the Hillers over again.
We're used to making noise and being able to jump around and do all sorts of stuff. And in the second floor of a 3-level apartment building with people above and people below, we're like, okay, guys, our windows to make noise were limited. We'll put it that way.
Sure.
And during the summer, and when the weather was nice, we could go outside. We could go to the pool. We could, even find a patch of grass in the apartment complex and throw the ball around.
Mm-hmm.
But man, that winter was kind of rough.
It makes it tough. It makes it tough. Well, and then the Lord would be building a friendship there between our 2 families, which we're really grateful for. And then you're talking about these guys that are part of your life. That's just so key. And those folks you met at church. Yes?
Yes. And when I say it took a while, because when I first knew we were coming down here, like I had been a part of a Bible study group in Chicago called Bible Study Fellowship.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, I'll probably do that down in Tennessee. It'll be a great way to make some friends. And I find out your husband is the guy who's the teaching leader down here. I'm like, oh, that's great. And then, of course, COVID hits.
I know.
And so we spend like the first year online on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, you could make acquaintances, but deep level friendship on Zoom, no.
Really tough.
Yeah, it was tough. And then you start visiting churches. And again,
also tough.
COVID.
Yeah.
Right? So people are wearing masks. They're like sit every other pew, all the things. So we're trying to do what we know to do to meet people and cultivate friendships. And even then, eventually, as restrictions loosen and all that stuff, we're like, okay, let's get involved in this class. And that just didn't work out and whatever. And so, okay, well, maybe we were asked to start a class.
Yeah.
And no one knew us.
Sure.
And so
they talk funny.
Like
they ain't from here.
They're not from here, and they talk funny, and nobody knew. And so that got off to a rocky start. But I think we just kind of kept saying, we're looking for our people.
Yeah.
And aside from you guys, it took us a while to find our people, but eventually eventually it did happen.
And what I hear you saying, though, is you persevered. You didn't give up and say, nobody likes us and nobody's friendly to us at this church and we're having a hard time getting to know. Like, you hung in there.
Like a hair and a biscuit.
Like a hair and a biscuit. Good job. Good job.
Thank you.
Good
I'm learning.
Yeah.
Y'all learning me.
We are doing my best to learn you, buddy. But you did. And now look at the fruit of what God has. Because, we talk about sowing the seed and watering the seed. And somebody is going to be there when that seed comes into full bloom and is harvested. But that's true about relationships too.
Yeah.
Like when you become friends with somebody, that's just kind of planting the seed. It takes time.
It does.
It takes persistence in order to have what we're saying in this one podcast about relational equity. And when the question came to me, it made me smile because of what the Lord has taught me through years of some bankrupt times, what I would think. Relationally, we had a lot of acquaintance friends.
Sure.
Not a whole lot of depth. And some of the ones that were deep, maybe their season had run its course, and some I still grieve that I lost those. And then I had to think about, well, Lord, what part of this am I playing that I don't have deeper friendships? What am I doing? Is there something that I am choosing over sowing into other people's lives and allowing them to sow into me?
Yeah.
And I think the season where you guys came down, because I was kind of used to working by myself. I solo hosted for a lot of years.
Yes, you did.
You don't have to share. You just have to learn how to do it. And once you get used to that, then you got to relearn something else.
Yep.
Right? So if you're used to doing a pogo stick and then you got to learn a seesaw,
it's a little different.
It's a little different. But we learned, and that helped that, we were like-minded and we could talk about things. And then meeting Susie and getting to connect with her. But then I had to let you guys into our lives too.
Yes.
Because I don't know if you noticed, but
we noticed
stiff-armed a lot of people to, in a way, I think I was telling Ben this the other day. I said, I realized that there were a lot of years I just circled the wagons in the May family and thought, if you can't accept all of us, then none of us are coming out to play.
Yeah.
So I just enjoyed the five of us and we did everything together. But talk about no relational equity.
Right.
When hard things happen, I mean, it's a good thing you got the five of you because you ain't got nobody else.
Yeah.
That's hard.
So as that dawned on you, and you like that? Yeah.
Nice.
So, and you were able to diagnose that was what happened.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to assume that you're like, okay, maybe now that the kids are older, I don't necessarily want it to be like that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start building some relational equity with friends, deepening friendships and those things. So what does that look like?
So, okay, let me back up and say I did have a friend that has stuck with me through all of that, but she does not live in this state. So that makes it a little tough. Like, we communicated, but even with her, I had to learn what I was keeping her at arm's distance. And then my best friend through high school and college and matron of honor in my wedding, like, she lives around here too, but because her kids were at a different school, they were doing their thing, we were doing ours. Like, we didn't get to spend a lot of time together, even though we had relational equity.
Yeah.
It just had to be put on pause.
Yeah.
So what'd you ask me?
So as you realize the May family had circled the wagon for these years, and then all of a sudden, hey, wait a minute, we don't have the relational equity that I wish we had. Your kids are now grown. You guys have the opportunity now to say, hey, let's pursue friendship, relationship. Let's go after deepening friendships and begin to cultivate that relational equity with people. What does that look like?
Yeah. It looked a lot like dying to self, because as I asked the Lord why we didn't have deeper friendships, and he started showing me some of the things. And not all of them were bad, if you want to label them bad, but they just kept deeper relationships from developing. So yes, deciding that, trusting the Lord with details and heart stuff, coming to realize that perfection is, number one, not attainable. Number two, it doesn't bring God any more glory than all your mess. But that was where I was. I thought, if you want the Lord to shine through your life, you got to let him, which that I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, or intuitive, that yes, you got to let God do it. But where I was is, if there was any pain or difficulty, I just wanted it to be on this level so that others could see God holding us in that. And so that kept emotions kind of in check. It kept, we talked about compartmentalization on one of the podcasts.
Yeah.
And that's where I got.
You're real good at that.
But a lot of it that I had perfected growing up, but then I just continued that in my adulthood. So what it looked like was recognizing my own part that I played on behalf of myself and my family, recognizing that imperfections come with all of us, and that the Lord will use you if you surrender to him and allow him to do that. And then embracing not only my mess, but others. Because part of my struggle is, I don't mind walking in the mess with you because I got enough of my own. I don't mind walking in the mess with you. But so many times it's difficult when somebody wants to stay in their mess.
Yes.
It's so comfortable because it's what you've known for so long that you'd rather wallow in it than take one little step with the Lord out of it, and one more little step. And Steve, that just was hard for me because I had my own stuff.
Yeah.
So that I was wanting to be free of. And so that was part of recognizing, there's a lot of humility, and I didn't even understand how much of that was pride. I just didn't.
Yeah.
I just didn't get it until he allowed me to get it. And so, just laying all that down at his feet and saying, okay, this time when the Lord brings friends into your life, you're going to go the distance. You're not going to bail when things get tough. You're not going to bail when things get tough in your own life. Because sometimes you don't want to be around other people when things are hard for you.
Right.
Because you don't want to put them through that. You don't want them to see that.
Or pride. You don't want them to see it. Yep.
There's both, right? One, you don't want to make that person walk through the pain with you. Now I do, but then I didn't.
Yeah.
And two, I didn't want people to see how broken we were. Or I'm going to speak for me. I won't speak for my family, but me.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, in that season, I couldn't even articulate that. I was so, I think the only word I can use is blind in my heart to understand any of that. I just couldn't. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't.
We think a lot of that was just kind of a coping mechanism for self-protection.
1,000%. Ding, ding, ding,
right?
ding, 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 ding.
I think a lot of us have, our stories are different.
Yeah.
But we have maybe coped in very similar ways.
Sure.
Right? I'm going to keep people at bay. I'm going to let them in only so far. And they're not going to see my mess, or at least I'll only let them see just a little bit of the mess.
Sure.
Right? And I will walk with them up to a certain point.
Yep.
Till it becomes too uncomfortable because maybe their stuff is beginning to touch my stuff.
Sure.
And so I don't want to feel that. And so, I think until we get to the point where God pokes at us enough and says, no, we're going to deal with your stuff now.
Yep.
That there's an element of we don't see it because I don't want to see it.
Sure. But you
And sometimes
don't.
we're incapable of seeing it because of
That was
ways
it.
that, yeah.
That was it. Like, I think if you would have told me, I would have not even, I just didn't even know what you're talking about. And the weird part to me, though, is, and I still have some of this because I so want my life to reflect what God can do.
Yep.
I so want people to see Jesus, not me, that I was very confused that he can still see Jesus in the mess. And I wasn't trying to be perfect for perfect's sake. That's what's going to be really hard to understand from this conversation. It wasn't a facade for the sake of a facade. It was a facade because that's all I knew.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the house that Jack built, right?
Yeah.
I just didn't know.
And then at a certain point, God allowed you to see,
He did.
Hey, I am going to deal with your mess. And actually, people are going to be able to see me even more.
Crazy.
Because I'm doing stuff in you, changing you, and dealing with that mess.
Yeah.
Cool how God does that.
It's all him.
And, when we find people that we can go through that with, who are willing to walk with us through that, and we're willing to walk with them through that, man, relational equity is built right there.
That's it.
And then when the future messes come, man, you know who to go to.
Yep.
You got them there. Well, we're glad that you're with us today. DonandStevePlus.com is our website if you want to find out a little bit more about what we're up to and what we're doing. We've got links in the show notes to Raphael's Roastery, Raphael'sCoffee.com. And we appreciate you being with us and being our plus one today.